Hi, I'm Pat Mangan, Director of Governance Education at NRECA. Welcome to Governance Talk. My guest today is Nate Melby. Nate, you are the Chief Information Officer at Dairyland Electric Cooperative in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nate, your team was involved in an AI-driven project that brought great efficiencies to the referencing of turbine manuals. And this was for one of your coal-fired generation units at Dairyland, as it thinks about where AI might apply in the co-op. Let's start there.
Well, first, happy to share some of those exciting projects. The project specifically you're talking about is called VoltGen. It came on the heels of Oversight, which was Dairyland's internal private artificial intelligence project. So we've been down this road for a couple of years, and we have accumulated some experiences. And some of the advice that I would give to board members that are looking at governing AI is that first you have to understand what your risks are, understand what type of data that you have, and how that data will be used. I always recommend, especially for our industry, the use of private models instead of open models.
So talk about what you mean by open and private.
Yeah, so an open model is a model that you could publicly subscribe to. And when you feed it data, you run the risk of it training off of any data that you feed it.
And you're talking about ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, these types of tools?
Yes, those types of tools. Gemini is another one, and some of the other industry leading foundational models.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful with the way that they're configured. You have to be careful with the way that they may use your data. And private models too, I mean, they may use similar engines like the OpenAI GPT engine, but you can configure and control it in your environment.
Which is important because we want to make sure this data stays within the cooperative and doesn't go out and become public information.
That's exactly right.
Thanks for that explanation. So you mentioned risks. Talk a little bit more about that. What are some of the risks that boards ought to be concerned about here?
The risks of artificial intelligence, they're not unique to artificial intelligence, believe it or not. Artificial intelligence is new and it's a new conversation, but we've had cybersecurity risks that have been very significant risks to cooperatives and electric utilities for a long time. And so as we've started to practice better cybersecurity hygiene, vulnerability testing, penetration tests, assessments, data protection programs, those things, that solid cyber hygiene is the same thing that protects you when you implement artificial intelligence. But it really is about that data protection in this case. So making sure that you have an understanding of what type of data is involved, that it's not all data. You're not just sweeping across everything, that you're controlling exactly what goes into it. And once you do that, you understand what your expected output should be and validate that that's what you get.
From a practical standpoint, what advice do you have for boards in their oversight responsibilities? Because this is, as you just said, this is brand new technology. It's new to all of us, or most of us. And so talk about the oversight role. What advice do you have for boards?
The oversight role of a board, it takes into account risk. It takes into account, from an audit standpoint, how do we audit the risks that we have and how do we prioritize those risks as an organization? And so really the role of a board is to figure out where does that risk lie in terms of your priorities and your enterprise risk management plan. How do we govern that risk and de-risk maybe if we need to, but that begins with policy. And so having a good AI policy is a really good place to start. Now, there are a lot of views on what that can look like. My personal philosophy is that a policy around data protection may already cover most of what you need if you already have one. If you have strong data classification in your organization, you understand where your critical data is or your sensitive data, anything that it has a compliance requirement. And so if you start there, then you start asking questions about how do we use that data? And have we validated that we're either not putting that kind of data in that environment? What controls do we have in place around that? And have we validated that with internal or external audits? But then, taking it a step further, if you are using your data in these types of environments, then we have to validate that it's being used in the way that you think it is or that you plan for it to be used.
Which goes to testing, I would imagine, repeatedly testing. So a question a board might ask is, have we adequately tested this to ensure that it's keeping our data private? Something along those lines?
Yeah. Yeah. And, the testing exists along the infrastructure that you build it on. It
Mhm.
also exists along the data that goes in and the output, and your whether or not the artificial intelligence is training on that or not. Are you just using it to interpret data that is there and not training off of that data? So there are different levels that we can go to with all of this, and it's really a matter of understanding what is it you're trying to do and make sure that is exactly what's happening and not something else.
Very good. Nate Melby, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.